Okay, so with the massive banhammer dangling over the test server like the sword of Damocles, ready to drop at the moment the devs return from their holiday break, I thought it'd be fun to wade through the cesspool of cope from exploiters. These folks are spinning tales so hard you'd think they were auditioning for a daytime soap, all in an effort to convince the community they're noble testers wronged by some heartless corporate overlord for no reason at all. Unfortunately for these clowns, most of the testing community knows the difference between bug reporting and bug exploiting. So let's take a refresher course on what it actually means to test Ashes of Creation. Meanwhile, the exploiting slugs can head to the comments section and start brewing up more excuses while giving me free algorithm interaction. Unfortunately, before we dive into the meat of this discussion, we need to lay down some definitions, because apparently some folks think the terms of service is just a polite suggestion rather than rules that could yeet them out of the game. TOS means terms of service. This is a long contract written by a team of suits paid to protect the company and its property. You agree to this contract when you download Ashes and play it. Once you no longer agree to abide by the rules in the contract, you lose the right to test the game. If you break the TOS, you lose the right to test the game. However, as we've seen with players getting their characters reset to level 1, testers may be allowed another chance to test the game after learning the consequences of their actions. Testing. We are testers right now. The game hasn't officially launched, it's incomplete, and we've paid for the opportunity to be a part of the open development of the game. We are not players, we are not consumers. In this second phase of Alpha 2, that simply means being bodies on the server and playing the game to find technical issues the game has and to provide feedback for the multitude of unfinished placeholder systems. Bug reporting. Our mission, as testers, is to discover bugs and use /bug to report them to the team so they can be fixed. Once we discover and report a bug, we're supposed to move on with our test session, leaving the bug alone. Exploits and exploiters. A bug that benefits a player in a way that's outside the normal gameplay pattern is an exploit. And testers using these exploits to gain an advantage over other players following normal gameplay patterns are exploiters. The devs have noted that testing a few bugs a few times to understand what causes it and that it is in fact repeatable won't get a tester in trouble. But if you tell your friends or make a video on how you and them can get together to exploit the bug, you're no longer testing a bug, you and your friends are exploiting it. Harassment. The terms of service outlines what can be considered harassing behavior, but if something isn't on the list, it doesn't mean that it's not considered harassment. Some of the examples in this list include doxing, name-calling, or engaging in discrimination, making offensive or inappropriate comments, making false tickets or reports about events or any third party, and most relevant to our discussion, using exploits to obtain an unfair advantage against other members of the community in-game. Termination. The TOS states in case of minor violations of these rules, Intrepid may, but is not obligated to, provide a prior warning and/or suspend access or use of the account prior to terminating the agreement, modifying or deleting an Intrepid account. A warning may be like, oh, I don't know, resetting a character to level 1 for exploiting mob glitches, duping bugs, or harassment of fishermen. Most Intrepid account suspensions and terminations are the result of violations of this agreement, and in the event of termination, all licenses granted are revoked and you lose access to everything you had in the game and even access to the game itself. And finally, in a recent announcement about the Guild Wars exploit, Steven said this: "If you find a bug, or a suspected bug, bring it up in Discord and refrain from engaging with the bug in a repetitive manner, or it could result in account action." Now, with all of that nonsense and necessary information out of the way, let's dive into the absolute mental gymnastics some exploiters are pulling to justify their actions. It's like watching someone argue that stealing candy from a store is okay because they're just testing the security cameras. Here are some golden nuggets from the comment section of my exploiter video I released on the 30th. Good faith testing, trying to break the game as much as possible so that major bugs and exploits don't make it into the release. Bad faith testing, expecting a fair and balanced gameplay experience where the dev bans anyone who tries to break the game. This poor individual seems to think that the terms of service only applies to the final version of the game. Unfortunately for them, Steven has already established that exploiting in the test version is no different than exploiting the live version. How about this one? I candidly couldn't care less if they're doing it in good faith or not. They found a bug during an alpha test, exploited a bug during an alpha test, and the devs were made aware of it and fixed it. The process worked. Whether or not they followed some protocol or not is irrelevant to me. This person literally said, exploited a bug during an alpha test, which could also be written as violated the terms of service. Regardless of this person's opinion on the matter, the terms of service was broken in their example and is subject to termination as a result. Now, this conversation is gold. It sounds to me like they should fix the exploit and thank the testers for showing how vulnerable it currently is. To fix people from exploiting again, you fix the exploit. This is what I'm talking about. When should you find exploits if not now in alpha? It's better the whole community knows about it than 1 or 2 guilds. Keep it in their pocket for full release. And then finally, the problem clearly is some people signed up to alpha test but aren't there to actually test. They just want to play. And when a game-breaking exploit gets abused, they want the exploiters pushed, and I imagine this means punished, as if the game were in a 1.0 launch state. Fortunately, it sounds like the devs are not dumb enough to listen to the whining if testers want to quit because they aren't having fun due to exploits. Great. Replace them with another wave of testers. All 3 of these individuals confuse the word bug with exploit. None of them understand that a bug is what testers look for, and exploiting those bugs, or breaking the game as they say, is what Steven would call sullying the test environment. Now, the last person did say something useful. If people can't enjoy the test without exploiting or don't understand the difference between testing and exploiting, great! Let's replace them with testers who actually want to help the game improve. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, let's shift gears a second, and let's talk about harassment in a game like Ashes of Creation, where PvP conflict is not just expected, it's a feature. The question is, where does competitive trash talk end and actual harassment begin? Last night, or 2 nights ago, I had an encounter with a deliberately toxic guild in the Forge. What you're seeing now is the entire event. In a PvX game, you're going to run into situations where stronger groups or guilds push others out of contested areas. That's part of the game design. But what about when their actions come wrapped in a package of verbal abuse? Is it part of the competitive atmosphere, or does it cross a line? Now, I'll admit I'm not a huge fan of PvP. If I could rewrite Ashes, it would look more like Final Fantasy XIV, where player conflict is optional and tied to fun cosmetic rewards. But this isn't that game. And I knew that when I signed up for it. Fighting rival guilds over resource nodes and getting stomped because I'm underleveled and undergeared is just part of the deal. But butting heads with opponents is one thing. Dealing with toxic behavior is another. Intrepid has made it clear that they don't want the game environment to turn into a toxic cesspool, but without a clearer definition of what harassment looks like in PvP, it's hard to know where the line is drawn. So let's take a look at that gray area between competitive banter and outright harassment. The Forge PvP encounter got me thinking, when does get good cross into report the bitch? In the example I'm showing you now, a stronger group with better gear, clearly all level 25 or very high, rolled into the area. My group didn't stand a chance, so we did the only sensible thing. We left. Eventually. Losing the grind spot wasn't the issue. It's the commentary in chat that raised our eyebrows. The TOS states that name-calling or making offensive or inappropriate comments, qualifies as harassment. But where exactly does trash talk fit into that equation? Is it just part of the game's PvP culture, or does it cross a line when it gets to this level? To my knowledge, there isn't a way to report players for inappropriate chat behavior directly in-game. This leaves a lot of room for interpretation and abuse. If Steven or another moderator happens to see this video, it would be great to get a clearer picture of where Intrepid stands. What's just competitive ribbing, and what's an actionable TOS violation? And how do we report that kind of behavior? Other games like Final Fantasy XIV have zero tolerance for abusive behavior in chat. They hand out bans and suspensions with the precision of a well-timed raid mechanic. Will Ashes of Creation follow that model, or will Intrepid allow a little more leeway? Without clarity, the only way to find out is by testing the limits like this toxic little gremlin did. And I think we all know how that's going to go. For those of us who prefer farming the environment over brawling with other players, the PvP environment in Ashes of Creation is just something we're gonna have to live with. The game is built around conflict, and not every loss to another player is going to count as a TOS violation. Until Intrepid draws clearer lines, we're left navigating this toxic gray area on our own. And as for the ongoing tester versus exploiter debate, Steven's response to exploiters and harassers in the coming days to weeks will be the line in the sand that everyone is waiting for. The question isn't whether exploiters will cross it, it's how many players will they affect negatively before getting whacked by the ban hammer. That's all for today. You're welcome.